This is the story of how Ford spent millions to build an engine so massive it required cutting apart the Mustang just to fit it under the hood. In 1969, Ford's Boss 429 powered cars to 26 NASCAR wins and delivered David Pearson the Grand National Championship, briefly ending Chrysler's Hemi dominance. But here is where it gets interesting. The street version disappointed almost everyone who bought one. So why did Ford build 1,359 hand-assembled homologation specials that now sell for over $500,000? And what made this engine so different that engineers called it the shotgun? The answer involves a fired president, a driver punching a NASCAR official, and one of the most audacious gambles in Detroit history. The Boss 429 exists because NASCAR banned Ford's previous weapon. In 1964 and 65, Ford developed the 427 single overhead cam, nicknamed the Cammer. NASCAR deemed it too exotic and refused to homologate it. Meanwhile, Chrysler's 426 Hemi dominated Daytona and kept winning. Ford needed something new, something that would fit NASCAR's rulebook while still beating Chrysler. The rules were clear. NASCAR required automakers to install at least 500 engines in production street cars before that engine could race. Ford's engineers went back to the drawing board with a singular mission. Robert Yates, who worked at Holman Moody developing the engine, later explained they wanted a hemispherical engine like Chrysler's. They wanted to make it better, and they wanted to leapfrog them if they could. The result was a clean sheet design that earned the nickname Shotgun. The name came from the massive round intake and exhaust ports in the aluminum cylinder heads. Intake ports measured 2.13 inches in diameter, while exhaust ports were 1.775 inches. According to Hot Rod magazine, you could literally stuff a tennis ball down the intake ports. Other names floated around during development, including Blue Racer, Twisted Hemi, and Semi-Hemi, but Shotgun stuck. The official name came from designer Larry Shinoda. When people asked about his secret project, he told them it was the boss's car, referring to Ford President Bunky Knudsen. The name stuck and became official. What made this engine special was not just the port size. The semi-hemispherical crescent combustion chamber formed the heart of the design. It was based on a traditional hemispherical configuration, but with filled-in sides providing better quench zones. Instead of conventional parallel rocker shafts, the Boss 429 used individual pedestals for each valve, with short rocker arms for intake and long arms for exhaust. This created the distinctive wide valve covers that made the engine instantly recognizable. The dry deck design separated the block and cylinder head coolant circuits completely. Instead of conventional head gaskets, the engine used Cooper rings, hollow metal tubes machined into receiver grooves around each cylinder. Period engineers called this system essentially bulletproof. Here's where corporate politics shaped automotive history. The original plan was to put this massive engine in the full-size Galaxy. But Bunky Knudsen, who had just arrived from General Motors in February 1968, had different ideas. He suggested putting the 429 in the Mustang. There was just one problem. The engine would not fit. The Boss 429's enormous aluminum cylinder heads measured significantly wider than anything previously fitted to a Mustang. Ford turned to CarCraft, their de facto skunkworks operation in Brighton, Michigan. This was the same outfit that built the GT40 Mark IV, which won Le Mans in 1967, still the only All-American Le Mans victory ever. In an incredible 3 weeks during September 1968, CarCraft produced a working prototype. The modifications required were extensive. They cut and relocated the shock towers outward to create wider engine bay clearance. They moved the battery from the engine bay to the trunk because there simply was no room under the hood. They installed the largest factory hood scoop ever put on a production Mustang, a record that still stands. And this became the first Mustang with a rear sway bar. Air conditioning was impossible. The engine took every available inch. The first Boss 429 Mustang, serial number KK1201, rolled off the CarCraft line on January 15, 1969. The engine was officially homologated on March 13th. Just 17 days later, Cale Yarborough won the Atlanta 500 in a Wood Brothers Mercury. The Boss 429's NASCAR career had begun. What happened next shocked everyone, including Chrysler. In the 1969 season, Boss 429 powered cars won 26 NASCAR races. David Pearson, driving the Holman Moody No. 17 Ford, won 11 races with 42 top 5s and 44 top 10s in 51 starts, capturing the Grand National Championship. At Daytona, Pearson became the first driver to exceed 190 miles per hour in qualifying, hitting 190.029 miles per hour. Robert Yates later explained why it worked so well. When they came out with that Boss engine, they kicked Chrysler's butt. They beat them in power, they beat them in weight. The Hemi weighed about 700 pounds. The Boss weighed around 600 pounds. That 100-pound advantage was crucial. Racing specification engines produced 580 to 600 plus horsepower. But the street version told a different story. Ford advertised 375 horsepower at 5,200 RPM. Everyone knew this was conservative. Automotive historian Roger Huntington noted the engine actually produced closer to 420 horsepower at 5,600 RPM. Hot Rod Magazine dyno tests showed over 500 horsepower from stock street versions. So why were buyers disappointed? Those massive shotgun ports that flowed so much air at high RPM made the engine inefficient at street speeds. The Boss 429 needed 5,000 RPM or more to breathe properly. In quarter-mile tests, car life recorded 14.09 seconds at 102.85 miles per hour. Respectable, but not the Hemi killer buyers expected for nearly $5,000. That price point matters. At $4,798, the Boss 429 cost roughly twice what a base inline-six Mustang cost. It was comparable to a 1969 Corvette Coupe at $4,781. The 1969 season wasn't without controversy. The inaugural race at Alabama International Motor Speedway in September became a flashpoint when the new track surface caused severe tire failures during testing. The Professional Drivers Association, led by Richard Petty, demanded postponement. NASCAR's Bill France Sr. refused, and he suggested drivers run slower. He personally drove a Ford Torino at 160 miles per hour to prove the track was safe. Leroy Yarbrough reportedly punched France during a heated meeting. 36 Professional Drivers Association members withdrew from the race in a boycott that included Richard Petty, Pearson, Yarbrough, Bobby Allison, and Wendell Scott. Richard Brickhouse won in a Dodge Charger Daytona. It was his only NASCAR victory. The Professional Drivers Association disbanded shortly after. Then NASCAR changed the game. On August 16, 1970, restrictor plates became mandatory on engines over 358 cubic inches. By 1971, NASCAR banned exotic engines, including both the Boss 429 and the 426 Hemi. The era was over. Ford had already pulled back. Bunky Knudsen was fired in August 1969. Lee Iacocca replaced him and cut the racing budget by 75%. Carcraft closed in 1970. The last Boss 429 Mustangs had already been built by December 1969. All 499 of the 1970 models were produced in calendar year 1969. Total production across both years was 1,359 units. That total includes 2 Boss 429 Mercury Cougars built for drag racers Dino Don Nicholson and Fast Eddie Schartman. Today, those 1,359 cars represent something remarkable. According to Hagerty, Concours condition examples approach $580,000. Average selling prices run around $325,000. Barrett-Jackson sold one for $550,000 in January 2025. The Boss 429 has been called one of the most stable muscle car investments over the past 10 years and sits among true blue-chip American classics alongside the Hemi Cuda and COPO Camaro. The gap between racing legend and street reality created the Boss 429's mystique. Buyers in 1969 expected a Hemi killer. They got a detuned NASCAR engine that needed high RPM to perform. That disconnect only increased the car's collectability. As Robert Yates put it, the thing they wanted to do more than anything was beat Chrysler. For one dominant season with 26 wins and a championship, the shotgun engine did exactly that. Ford's gamble, building over 1,300 hand-assembled homologation specials purely to race on Sunday turned stock cars into missiles. The fact that it also created one of the most valuable muscle cars in history was just a bonus.